and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter, and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Australian writers and other creatives.
And I'm Lynne Testoni. I'm a journalist and a content writer as well. Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we're bringing you all kinds of tips, tricks, and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business. This podcast is sponsored by our good friends at Rounded, easy accounting and invoicing software made just for Australian freelancers and sole traders. It's everything you need to make freelancing easier. Find out more at rounded.com.au.
Also, if you're a gold member of Rachel's List, Rounded is giving you 20% off an annual subscription plan. Upgrade to gold membership for all the details.
Hey, Rach, how are you? No, you're back to the big school holiday juggle, and it's almost over though, isn't it? How are you managing?
Yeah, I'm managing, I suppose. I've had a couple of migraines and lots of vacation care to sort of fit in the gaps. And so, yeah, it's been good. I think I'm feeling quite traumatized by the whole thing. I'll be glad when he goes back to school on Wednesday. Every term it's like, oh, we're going to send them back on Tuesday. Now they're sending them back on Wednesday because of the holiday. So, but my kid is very happy about the extra day. So you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But back to this week's episode, and we've got a journalist and a writer with an amazing story. His name is Shannon Molloy. And before I ask you to do the intro, I wanted to mention that we'll be discussing some really tough topics this week, including child sexual abuse. So if this is triggering for any of the listeners, you might want to skip this one.
Here's a little bit about Shannon. Shannon Molloy is an award-winning journalist and author. He was the 2020 recipient of Journalist of the Year at the Mumbrella Publish Awards, and in 2023 was named in the Pride 100 list of influential LGBTQ Australians. His debut book, 14, a memoir about growing up gay in regional Queensland, is a critically acclaimed bestseller that was turned into a sellout hit stage production and is now being adapted for the screen. Shannon's groundbreaking new book is You Made Me This Way, described as a genre-defying feat of storytelling, and it is amazing. Welcome, Shannon.
Hello, how you going?
It's really great to have you on, and we know from behind the scenes this has taken a bit of wrangling because you've been sick and we've been sort of trying to, get a date together. So it's great to finally have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here, and thanks so much for your patience. It's been a doozy of a couple of months, I have to say.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the joy of juggling, like children, work, you're sort of like your novelist, all the different roles that you're juggling. That's what happens, really, isn't it? Mm.
And one of the things I find really fascinating about your career, Shannon, is you do, these nonfiction books and they're quite confronting big reads, and you sort of balance that with a day job. So how do you do that?
Oh, gosh. I think it depends on the week or the month as to how successfully I manage that juggle. This one particularly has been really tough because of the toll that writing about child sexual abuse, including my own experience, kind of took. I really underestimated how heavy this would be at times, and so I dove in, and then it was kind of too late to get out of it, and I just had to push on. But doing with a day job as well was really tricky, because sometimes when you've been writing all day, the last thing you want to do when you come home is to keep writing for this kind of project in the background. Then added to that, being a relatively new father as I was at the time, turning the first book into a stage production, which I was quite involved with, helping to write the screen adaptation of it. It was a very busy 2022. And then, of course, launching the book at the start of this year added to it as well. So I think that's when, I had a couple of weeks off from the book tour, and then fell into a heap of, flus and colds and everything else. It's true what they say about, when you stop it all goes to poo. So yeah, here we are.
Here we are. Oh, so much to unpack there, because the book, You Made Me This Way, is not just something that you could just do in your own time. There's a lot of, it's really quite strong, quite confronting journalism, because you spend time not only talking about your own experience, but you also interview other people, other men who've suffered from sort of child sexual abuse. So you must have spent a lot of time with them. I mean, many interviews, and that would have been hard, just finding the time and then
Yeah,
the
yeah.
recovery time after each chat.
Well, and then transcribing it. I did 80 hours of interviews with about a
Gosh.
dozen men, and
Mm,
then there's technology now like Otter where it kind of transcribes
mm,
it for you.
mm,
But in addition to not being kind of perfect, there's
mm.
parts of it that don't pick up the language. I find transcribing a really interesting way of developing the story because you sort of
Yeah.
get to hear it a second time. You kind
Yeah.
of miss nuances that you didn't get the first time around. So I transcribed those 80 hours of interviews, which is just another 80 hours of work essentially.
Yeah.
So living those really tough conversations the first time was one thing, and then living them again was even more daunting. I think being a news journalist, as I was for
Mm,
many
mm.
years, there wasn't, I don't know, I could compartmentalize a lot of that sort of
Yeah.
trauma of listening to those stories,
Mm,
those big heavy stories,
mm,
but then some of it sort of seeped out. But I really enjoyed that process of talking to these men. I'm just naturally fascinated by people and their stories
mm,
and the human condition. I really love doing the research for this book as well. I just went through reams and reams and reams of scientific studies and academic journal articles. I spoke to a number of experts as well. That
mm,
was really kind of enriching and fascinating.
mm,
But then actually sitting down to write this book,
mm,
I hated, to be perfectly honest.
mm,
I don't think I've ever hated anything that I've written before, or while writing it,
mm.
the process of writing. That's I feel like that's what I was born to do. But this was really challenging, and a couple of times at sort of the height of the horribleness of it, I tried to get out of the book deal, and
Wow.
Wow.
yeah, I'd had to be talked down from a ledge and reminded that I'd already spent the advance, so it was too late. Um,
Always a problem.
Always a problem. Yeah, there was no chance of getting it back either.
Yeah.
And then right at the end, I went away for a week to a little cabin in the Blue Mountains, and no phone, no internet, and locked myself away to sort of spend time with this book and pull it apart and put it back together and change things
Mm,
entirely, and or kind of appreciate the parts of it that I thought were really good. And then after that, I sort of thought, oh, okay, I think I've done something good here.
yeah.
Yeah, but it was a real juggle, and a real emotional journey. But
Mm,
the thing that kind of I think I was lucky with here is that I got the deal before I'd written the book, which is not always the case. I
yeah.
think I think being a journalist helped, writing nonfiction really helped.
Mm,
So that kind of kept me stuck to a deadline. I will never miss a deadline. That's just
mm,
that's why
Right.
yeah, you're a journo, that's what you do. And so I kind of had no choice,
mm.
which was both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. I have a friend who's a publisher, and she says how much she loves working with journalists because we always do understand deadlines. And I understand most of her other writers don't.
Yeah.
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 It's so interesting having read the book as well, and feeling that whole heavy sense of how much you would have had to dive into that subject matter and really sit with it, and perhaps be triggered by everything that you had to recount from other people, and also do justice to their stories. I'm not surprised you went to a cabin in the woods for a week. I mean, you kind of need that headspace, don't you, to kind
Yeah.
of rip it apart, put it back together, and feel like, okay, this is getting there now.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
can't imagine how you would do that with a little kid around, and all life.
And
Yeah.
distractions
Yeah.
and
Mm.
temptations, like I'm just going to go to the pub for an hour, or I'm just going to scroll on Instagram for 6 hours.
Yes, yeah.
So it was good to be free of all distractions and
Mm.
and immersed in it as well.
Yeah.
When there's all these other things going on, it kind of, can't see the forest for the
Mm.
trees almost. And so just to be alone with it really, really helped in a number of ways, helped me sort of find the flaws in it, but also to feel somewhat assured about what I was
Mm.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you kept in touch with all your the case studies, and do you sort of have this I don't know, friendship with those men, and still keep in touch?
I'm later today. I'm going to the movies with one of them.
Yeah.
We've become super close.
Mm.
He lives near me, which helps.
Mm.
Most of the other men, I don't think any of the other men live in Sydney. They kind of spread all over the country.
Mm.
One's in New Zealand. But we stay in touch. They were the first people to read the draft of the manuscript, and then again to read the kind of pre-press version. I sent them all the first copies off the press first. I was really careful to make sure that they not only were totally comfortable with everything that was written, how it was portrayed, but also that they kind of, they felt celebrated for the enormous contribution that they made.
Yeah.
This book's about me and kind of the journey of me figuring out why I am the way I am, but it wouldn't exist without these men. I spoke to a dozen. I think there's 5 in the book in the end.
Yeah.
Some didn't want to be in the book. Some pulled out at the 11th hour, which was totally fine. Some just wanted to talk. They just wanted to tell me what had happened to them for kind of context and background. So I've met these incredibly inspiring men who I wouldn't be talking to you now if not for them. So yeah, we've stayed in touch, and me and a few of them more than others because of they're busy or they're traveling or whatever. So that's really a beautiful thing, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what you said is so important, that you have to check all of that stuff and say, was anything lost in translation? Because the last thing you want, isn't it? It's for them to read it and just feel like
Totally.
they'd been
Yeah.
misrepresented in some way. So that would have been a big part of it as well before you even got to filing it, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the kind of fear of like, please don't, please don't hate it. It's
Or
'cause I don't want
change
to
anything,
rewrite
or
it.
yeah, exactly.
It's quite a responsibility and also a privilege to tell their stories, but that privilege comes with that level of responsibility. You want to do their stories justice. You want to honor their experience and their bravery, really.
And frankly, like, in kind of a selfish way, the burden, like that's what made this so challenging, was that, it wasn't just a book about me, and if it was, I probably wouldn't care so much whether or not it was good, but I felt this burden to not just do their stories justice, but to make this book good, so that people do read it and they do talk about it, and that there's something perhaps positive that comes out of these awful experiences.
Yeah.
I remember reading about you and your therapist and how, you just didn't want to go, and there was so much pull. Have you kind of, I can't remember if you ditched him or not.
I did.
I did.
Okay. Yeah.
I did. Mostly because I kind of reached the end of the usefulness of that
It
type
wasn't
of
productive.
therapy. No, and like he was a super old school therapist where you literally go in and lay on the couch and talk, and that's really, really helpful, particularly for someone like me who had never kind of spoken about myself. I'd always deflect and defer when the nitty-gritty of me came up in conversations. And so that was great, like unlocking things and remembering a lot, kind of these almost weekly sort of aha moments where, it was like, oh my God, I've never thought about it that way. And of course that makes perfect sense. Then I kind of got to the point where it was like, all right, I need a little bit of homework. I need some more contemporary types of therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, where I don't just know what's wrong. I kind of then figure out how to fix it and work on that. And so that's kind of the stage I'm at now, which is both great and not. I kind of liked just for an hour a week, it's all about me and I can talk, and then there is no homework.
Yeah.
So but it's all for the best.
Yeah. Great.
Tell us a little bit about your day job as well. So you've just changed because you were writing about real estate. You worked with news for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, I was at News Corp for, I think it was about 8 years all up. I started in the national kind of digital team, and then went into national features, writing a lot of celebrity profiles. Kind of the best job I've ever had, I think. It was, obviously lots of fun and very exciting, but also really challenging to go in and interview someone who's been interviewed 1,000 times and try and get something new or
That is
kind
hard,
of
isn't it?
fascinating out of it. Yeah, but the best challenge made me a brilliant. Well, sorry, that sounds really arrogant. Made me a good interviewer and a bit much better writer. Then I kind of went back into news journalism, which is, I think, where my heart is. That's where I started my career, kind of chasing breaking news. So went back into that as a senior reporter, and then became news editor at news.com.au. And then I think the combination of wanting to write this book, being a new father, feeling very stretched. I don't think I could have been a good father and write this book while having such a demanding job like
Yeah.
news editor at news.com.au. So I kind of wanted to step back a bit, still be interested and do interesting work, but in a very tightly contained 8 hours a day and not a minute more. So I went to realestate.com.au as their news editor, and I love property and markets and economics.
Don't we all? That's a
Yeah.
Sydney thing, isn't it? We all
It
discuss
is.
property
Sure
forever.
It's a
is.
curse.
Whether it's up or down.
Yeah. I do think, are we the only kind of city that are very cool about saying, hey, what did you pay for that? You know, we just have no qualms about asking that question.
It's such an odd thing, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
it's, I'm not originally from Sydney, but I'm still just amazed that if you go to a dinner party or a barbecue, the first thing someone asks you is what school you went to. Then it's about property markets and what you paid. And I think none of your business.
Yeah.
Hopefully less than what I sell it for, but
I find it's interesting with when we bought our house, like all my friends knew because as soon as I bought it, they were all Googling on realestate.com to see how
Yeah.
They
much
probably
we
rang the real estate agent. Lynne.
Yeah.
They probably did. Yeah.
Yes. Nothing's
Yeah.
truly private anymore.
No, that's right. Yeah.
But I loved that. I loved that job because it's just a different type of storytelling, and there's always something new. There's always a different take, and I love people stories. And what a better kind of human story than doing this big thing that's often one of the biggest things you do in life. So I loved
Yeah.
it. But then, a new challenge called, and I've moved to the public service, working for a brilliant public servant as her kind of personal comms person, which again is just storytelling at its heart. So yeah, new challenge, new adventure.
Oh, that's
Off I
exciting.
go. Yeah.
And is it better work-life balance than being at news?
Hopefully.
Is that the plan?
It's early days. It's early days, but I hope so. I hope so. I mean, the book stuff is the book's been out for 3 months, I think now. It's settling and finding its place, which is great. The kind of the daily frenetic pace of it is easing. So I kind of feel like I'm ready to take a break and just be a dad and have a day job and see how that goes. So yeah, hopefully it's a good balance.
Yeah. I wanted to just ask about you becoming a dad because it was such a big process for you. Talk us through a little bit about that.
I mean, yeah, it's like we were exhausted by the time she came because it was such an uncertain and strange time. It was right kind of, I think, less than a year into COVID. She came to us via surrogacy in the United States, which in a normal world is challenging enough, and it's difficult to navigate. But then in COVID, it was at a time where you couldn't leave the country without permission. You certainly couldn't get back in without permission. There were a couple of flights a week to North America. They cost an absolute bomb. Coming back in, there were those arrival caps, and so a lot of people were getting to the airport to be told, sorry, the Australia is at its capacity for today, you can't fly. So doing all of that with a newborn was stressful. But then, of course, she was not an Australian when she was born, so foreigners were banned from entering the country, and we had to sort of make her an Australian overseas without consular support because they were all shut, and try and make a several month process, a kind of 2 or 3 week process, which was something else.
Yeah.
So in the end, we were stuck in the US for about 3 months
Yeah.
with a newborn.
With a newborn, without any family support, just
No
the
That's
two
a
of you
learning
and the
curve.
baby.
Yeah, just the two of
Gosh.
us being like, "Oh my God, how do you bath the baby?" Like,
Yeah.
let's YouTube it.
Yeah.
Which then you think like, "Oh, that's weird." Yeah, so it was quite a time.
Yeah. She is just adorable. I think
Yeah.
that your Insta is my favorite baby Insta. I can just go there for some cuteness when I need to.
Yes, she's very cute.
She's a
Yeah.
She is
lovely little
very
girl.
cute.
We've been very, very blessed to, every parent says it, but just to get the best baby. Very chill, very happy, very curious about the world, which is so I don't know, it's kind of energizing to watch a little person discover things for the first time and be just fascinated by them. So yeah,
It is
Absolutely.
lovely.
That's parenting in a nutshell, isn't it? You kind of
Mm.
almost
yeah,
become a kid again yourself because
yeah,
you're seeing the world through them.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
yeah.
is
Yeah.
lovely. I think that is one of the lovely things.
Mm.
I wanted to also talk about 14, and that
Mm,
was your first book, which is about growing up gay in rural Queensland, which Yeppoon, wasn't it?
yep.
I mean, I haven't been to Yeppoon, but it's it's in the boondocks, really, isn't it?
Mm,
So tell me a little bit about that, because I'd love to hear about the path to publishing with that. How did that
yeah.
go?
It was all entirely accidental,
Mm.
which was great. Yeah, so I was working at News. I was in
Mm.
national features. The safe schools debate was sort of kicking off.
Mm.
I don't know if you remember that. It was sort of
Yeah.
it was around the end of 2015. It got really nasty really quickly. I guess the context is that
Mm.
Safe Schools was this anti-bullying campaign, kind of designed to protect LGBTQ kids and educate their peers about
Mm.
what it means and kind of
Mm.
demystify it. And if you
Mm.
take the unknowns away, hopefully what's left
Mm.
is tolerance. It was a very weaponized initiative that politically became really ugly and really divisive. I remember I was on the train home from work one day. It was mid-February in 2016, and I read a news story about a parliamentarian standing that day in Parliament to describe safe schools as nothing more than a way for gay men to groom boys.
Mm.
It's a really old trope from kind of the 80s and 90s
Mm.
that compares gay men to pedophiles. And as long as it's been around, it still doesn't hurt any less reading
Mm.
that kind of description, particularly in the context of someone who experienced child
Mm.
sexual abuse. I found it
Mm.
really upsetting. And then I just sort of thought, like, God, if I'm as a 30 something well-adjusted man living in Sydney, living the dream.
Mm.
If this upsets me, imagine what 14-year-old terrified me in regional Queensland might have felt
Mm.
hearing this elected official stand in this hallowed place and talk about people like me as being predators.
Mm.
And so I wrote an opinion piece without really thinking about it, just bashed it out in, 10, 15 minutes, really angry but impassioned, talking
Mm.
about this awful day when I was 14 and tried to take my own life after being bullied at school for the umpteenth time, and
Mm.
what a program like Safe Schools might have meant for me. The piece went viral, which was amazing but very unexpected.
Mm.
On the back of that, the piece ran the next day in most News Corp newspapers in the
Mm.
opinion section around the country, which in itself was a kind of big deal.
Yeah.
And the result, like the resulting thing from that was that I had thousands of messages from people on email,
Mm.
Instagram, DM, Facebook, Twitter, saying all wonderful things. But amongst them were about half a dozen messages from mums of boys like me who
Mm.
hadn't survived. And
Oh.
they all kind of said in their own way, like, please keep telling your story, please keep talking.
Mm.
And it was the first time, I think, in my career that I saw value in talking about myself. I'd never been
Mm.
comfortable being the story,
Mm.
was kind of, opposed to it almost.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, I think there's something here. I think there's, in this awful trauma
Mm.
that I've never really
Mm.
spoken about or addressed at that
Mm.
time, I think there's something worthwhile.
Mm.
So I had in my head the idea of 14, this horrible year when I was 14, talking about that,
Mm.
and not just how awful it was, but how I got out of there, to
Yeah.
drive home for kids or their parents or
Mm.
just anyone in general, that it does get better. And then a mate who works in the media was at a lunch next to someone from my publisher, and she mentioned that they were looking for new voices, and did he know anyone, because journos tend to be great clients for
Mm.
publishers. And that was it. I wrote a little pitch to get me in the room, and then there were many conversations and a couple of sample chapters and a bit of back and forth, and then the offer, and a very tight deadline to write 80,000 words about myself in,
Gosh.
I think it was 5 months, no,
Oh,
six
wow.
Oh,
months,
Mm.
and
wow.
and that
Mm.
then the rest is history.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it's been adapted for the stage as well, because you talked about
Yeah.
that earlier, and I'd seen something on your Instagram. What was that process like? That's a whole other process, isn't it?
Amazing. I mean, I had
Mm.
no idea what I was doing.
Mm.
As a gay man of a certain age, I've seen plenty of shows on the stage,
Yes.
but you never
Yeah.
really think about what goes into that.
Mm.
And so it was just, I barely have the words. It was to be kind of in the room where it happens, to steal a line from Hamilton, was amazing. Like
Yeah.
watching them kind of, take an idea, which was the book, and turn it
Mm.
into a narrative,
Mm.
a very different type of storytelling with a lot more involved. Then to build the set around it, and find the actors and put it all together, and changing things on the run in the rehearsal room was just fascinating,
Mm.
absolutely fascinating. And to be a small part of that was like just a life's honor. And then sitting in the theater in this beautiful like QPAC in Brisbane,
Mm.
the very
Mm.
first show I saw at 13 or 14 was in that theater.
Wow.
So then to have a part of my life
Mm.
told, and for
Mm.
every night to be a sellout show, and hear people, crying or
Mm.
laughing because it was funny in parts as well. It was just the most extraordinary experience. And yeah, and now we're working on taking another road, which is very exciting.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
amazing.
doing a film or something, or is it a TV?
So we're also separately to this, developing it for the screen.
Yeah.
So a series, a multi-part series for, well, TV, but probably a streamer, because that's where the
Mm.
money seems to be,
Yes.
what money's left. And so that's kind of, it's in its infancy, but also not. Like the whole thing's been scripted. We got some
Mm.
development funding from Screen Australia to hire writers and a
Mm.
and a sort of principal showrunner, and sit together for a few weeks and
Mm.
throw ideas around, and then put it all together. And it's fantastic. It's the book and my story, but with the kind of usual TV enhancements that you might expect,
Mm.
and just that of the era, late 90s campness and pop culture
Mm.
that made that period of time so palatable for
Mm.
me.
Mm.
So that will hopefully be coming to a screen of some sort near you soon. Yeah, one hurdle's been jumped in writing it and developing it, and now the next hurdle is
Making it.
funding it and
Yeah.
producing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you, I mean, two such really big, amazing, and quite heavy books. I mean, where are you now on the other side of those? I mean, has it been really cathartic for you? Do you get a sense like I want to walk away from that now and put that down and, kind of get away?
Yeah, that was certainly the case with 14. It was, the best therapy
Mm.
that was free and paid a little bit of money. It was a really cathartic process to go back to this period of time
Mm.
and relive it, but also to find the happy moments in this year that
Yeah.
I remember remembered at that stage being horrible, with no redeeming
Mm.
qualities, no positives, no
Mm.
no light moments, and a sea of darkness. And then, of course, pondering it with the benefit of 15 or 20 years of wisdom, whatever
Mm.
it was at the time, seeing that there were happy moments in that
Mm.
year, and that's what saved me. That's what got me through. The love of a small group of friends, having a great mum who herself had struggled and suffered, having a love of writing and of
Mm.
90s pop culture and music,
Yes.
Yeah.
and almost healing from that in itself,
Yeah.
seeing that, oh, okay, of course it was horrible, and of course I wish it hadn't happened, but all these lovely things came of that,
Mm.
which I think is the case, many times for us when we
Mm.
go through tough periods. There are some silver linings in those clouds often. And then, writing it, I always find a cathartic thing as
Mm.
a writer. From the age of 5 or 6,
Mm.
I've always written when I feel
Mm.
sad or scared or angry, and even
Mm.
happy and joyful. But then spending the better part of 2 years talking about it,
Mm.
in many different ways, and meeting so many people who could relate to the story, gay or not. I met so many single mums like my mum who had sort of felt a lot of guilt about what they couldn't provide their kids, but then reading my book saw in themselves so many of the heroic qualities that my mum has, and
Mm.
then kind of felt better about themselves and how they parented.
That's lovely.
Yeah. Teachers who sort of felt like, so much of what they'd given of themselves was often thankless and maybe didn't have as much of an impact as it actually did. But reading about this one amazing teacher I had, they thought about themselves in a new way. It was just such a heartwarming experience. This new book, I think it's still a little early. It's
Yeah.
been really remarkable to see in such a short time the impact that it's having. I get at least a dozen emails a week from men who have bought this book discreetly, either on a Kindle or audiobook, because they've never spoken about this thing that happened to them 20, 30, 40 years ago. And
Gosh.
for the first time, they feel like they want to say something. And so they're emailing me saying, thank you. I didn't think I'd ever be at a point where I could talk about this. And I feel like I'm closer to that now. There
Wow.
are some men who've read this book and then spoken to their wives or their mothers or whatever for the first time to let them in and to take a bit of the burden off themselves. There are wives and mothers who know what's happened to the men in their lives and have read this book and understood much better why their men are the way they are. So that all helps me be in a really wonderful place. But for me, it's still new. Like it sounds so dumb and almost kind of not a smart idea. But when I wrote this book, I'd only spoken about what happened to me out loud maybe half a dozen times,
Yeah.
and then I wrote 80,000 words about it and put it out into the world. So I'm still, as I talk about it now or at writers' festivals, that's still, only in the early double digits that I'm talking about what happened to me, 30 plus years ago. So yeah,
Gosh.
it's interesting. It's like all healing. It's all a work in progress,
Yeah.
and it's probably never really done. It just gets a bit easier.
Yeah. Yep.
I wonder when you're talking about writers' festivals and things like that. I mean, when you've written a book like this, would that mean that sometimes people share stories of abuse and with the emails? That must be hard too, because you want to be there for them, but there's a limit to how much.
Like how many boundaries you need or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
It's another thing that I really underestimated.
Yeah.
I thought because of the 14 experience, I thought that people would, hopefully, this book would resonate and they would get in touch, which is wonderful and reminds me every time of the enormous privilege of writing a book and the position that I'm in to be lucky enough to tell my story. But it does take a toll. With this one, some of the stories are very in depth, if that makes sense. And so it takes a toll. So what I'm doing at the moment is kind of allocating a little bit of time, maybe sort of 3 hours on a Sunday or 2 hours on a Thursday, like the time when I'm kind of least burdened by the rest of life, to sit down and read those emails and start to write back. I kind of committed to myself long ago that if anyone takes the time to reach out to me, that I'm going to take the time to reply, not just with a generic thanks for reading
Yeah.
either. And so I write back to everybody eventually. If you're listening and you haven't heard back, I will get to you.
Gosh.
Yeah, some of it's really, really heavy, understandably so. In a way, isn't that what I've done to readers as well? So yeah, it's tricky though.
I noticed from the introduction in the book that you went through this legal minefield. Talk us through, I'm guessing that was a surprise in a lot of ways and a process.
It's as a news reporter, I've encountered more than my fair share of defamation lawyers who are lovely, but really, really suck the color out of a story sometimes.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
any journalist knows how absurd defamation law is in this country. If you've experienced it or if you've just watched a case where the story is true, but when you're sued for defamation, you have to prove the truth of that as though it was a criminal trial, which is really
And
difficult
then you
to
have
do.
to prove it's in the public interest as well, don't you?
Yes,
Which is,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Which is like that's such a vague description. There's
Yes.
Yeah.
there's well, and
Mm,
so is truth in some ways.
mm,
And so I expected going into this that it was going to be really tricky. So I kind of, preemptively worked with
mm,
lawyers on what I might be
mm,
able to say, what I mightn't be able to say. Even with even with the cases of men who had had a successful criminal prosecution of their perpetrators, of which there was only one, to be honest, we had to make sure that the story we were telling mirrored the, the facts in that court case. Otherwise, there was a potential to then be sued if the details strayed off course, or if they weren't mentioned in court, if there was an additional
Gosh.
element of criminality.
Right.
Stuff that is really tricky and really subjective. And as a storyteller, I find it annoying. I just want to tell the story that is in my head, that I've experienced and lived. But then at the end of the day, and I think I wrote it in the intro, I can't remember, but no, none of us in this process wanted to give a dime to these monsters.
Yeah.
So it was really important that we ensured the book was safe. And unfortunately, for some of the men who really wanted to be named, who really wanted to take full ownership of their story, it meant that we couldn't name anybody, because if you can trace back from a couple of details, which is fairly doable at times, and identify the perpetrator, then that person could sue. We've seen it in some recent cases where stories have erred really heavily on the side of caution, and there's still been a defamation action brought. Even if it's not successful, it costs a ton of money. It's a really annoying and stressful process. No one wants to be part of it. That's the reality of this type of storytelling. It's annoying, and I could speak for hours about the reforms that need to be taken in the area of defamation law, because it's so unfair to truth telling, and it's often used as a weapon by those who don't want something said and want to keep secrecy alive. Unfortunately, it's often used against women or the survivors of child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
It is. I mean, I know New South Wales particularly has the strictest defamation rules in the country, and Australia is one of the strictest defamation laws in the world. So it's hard.
Yeah. And really dissuades a lot of people from ever coming forward, which is horrible. There's so much to be got, if not from a criminal prosecution of the person who's inflicted this horror on you, from then at least reclaiming your story and taking back agency of your story and your life, to feel like that's not worth it because of the legal risk, I think is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely probably makes you think about fiction next time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not thinking about a lot at the moment. I'd love to keep this up because it's the greatest honor of a lifetime. I just cannot imagine what's next, though.
Yeah. Well, what would be important? I mean, say that somebody is listening and thinking, I want to have a crack at nonfiction writing. What would be some of the lessons that you've learned that you can impart to those people?
Detail. One of the big things that I tackled early on with a guy called Brandon Van Over, who was my publisher for my first book, was detail. As a journalist and as a writer of all nonfiction in my career, you'd hope, I was sort of used to just getting to the guts of the issue, getting to the heart of the story, and doing it in a kind of simple way. That's what news demands. Nonfiction writing, or just books in general, are the opposite of that. So I did a lot of exercises on detail and color. And there's one that I did with Brandon where he had me imagine, putting my hand into the pocket of, pants or the pocket of a coat, and there's lint in there. There's some sort of lint in there, and then imagining what that could be. And it's a stub from the cinema and it's gone through the wash, and what movie was it, and what was I doing that day, and who was I with, and how did I feel during the movie, and how did I reflect on it after, and kind of all these little strains of detail and color that you wouldn't get if you just said, I went to the movies, I left the stub in my pocket, it went through the wash, the end. So there's a lot of things like that. There's a lot of courses you can do on character development, things that that didn't necessarily come naturally to me and I had to really work on. So that's a really good one. And then the other, which sounds so obvious, but is kind of easy to either leave to the last minute or to not do well, is research. There's no such thing as too much research. Even if it's not useful for the book, it's kind of good for context. I read so much for You Made Me This Way that didn't really feature in the book. It wasn't useful at the end when I was writing it, but it kind of helped me to think of things in a different way. There was a lot that I read about, like age appropriate behavior, for example, based on articles from psychologists or psychiatrists in the United States, based on legal precedent in the UK, based on stories about cultural considerations in the Middle East, for example, that helped me think about you know what kids experience and how it might impact them. And I don't think I really touched on that in detail in the book, but it really helped me get inside the mind of victim survivors, and at their various ages, and kind of think about the kinds of questions that I wanted to ask them for that detail and for that color to make their stories really rich. So yeah, read everything you can. The other thing that I did particularly for this book, because I was so when I pitched the idea, I was so unsure about what kind of shape this might take, telling many stories, several stories, getting across a lot of information, and doing it all on a topic that's really, it's hard to pick up and decide to buy. So I read a lot of other nonfiction books and figured out what I loved, what I didn't, what I could do realistically.
Different structures, that sort
Different
of thing.
structures, a lot of different structures. Lee Sales' brilliant book, Any Ordinary Day. I'd already read it, but I reread it, and I think that that inspired some of the storytelling techniques in this book. Yeah, so that's another one. And then I just guess finally, be kind to yourself while you're writing, whether it's a tough topic or not. I think when it's a story that's true, there's a lot of pressure that you put on yourself to get it right. I'm sure fiction is really hard as well, but when you're telling the truth, it's good or bad. It's tricky, and you kind of second guess yourself and get in your own head, and really figure out that you are your own worst critic. So be go easy on yourself. And I guess that's another, my final tip, which I do with everything, my day job, all this book stuff, is to not edit as you're going along. Just keep writing. There's plenty of time for editing at the end. With a book, there's about 9 months worth of it after. With an editor, don't in the moment second guess or question yourself. Just keep writing. If it's crap, you'll pick it up later and get rid of it. It could be good, but you're just not sure in that moment. Or it could be a little nugget of something that you expand on and it becomes brilliant. If you delete it as you're going, you'll never have that opportunity to decide.
Amazing. Well, I mean, something that we're very big on in the podcast that listeners will know about is we love systems, and given you had to compile so much information and research and all of that, what were the tools that helped you do that and keep it organized so that you could write, in a, I don't know, linear, I don't even know if it's right to say linear way, because maybe it wasn't linear, but yeah. What would you have been lost without, I suppose?
Again, the transcripts, I tried using Otter, and I know a lot of people that love it. It kind of just wasn't for me. I'm quite traditional, I want the full transcript. I also want to refer back to the audio to sort of get emphasis, like these were emotive. And if someone started to cry or started to feel angry in that moment, I wanted to be able to relive that. So I would transcribe, but I'd also make notes of time codes of, emotion here at 4 minutes 50. And I had the printouts of it. Again, I'm very old school. Many trees were sacrificed for this project. All recycled paper though. And I would have them and refer to them as I went along. And I'd also I'd have the transcript in kind of the order that it was said, but I would color code for different themes like shame or vulnerability or relationship issues, all the things that I knew I wanted to discuss in the book. And then I'd kind of almost like an index card system. I would then know when I'm talking about vulnerability, oh, I need to refer to page 3 of this person's transcript to get a little taste of that. That's probably it.
That's fine. That's good.
There were so many, like there's a program, I think is it called Scrivener?
Yeah, Scrivener.
Yeah.
I tried that, and all of what I've just described would have probably been so much easier in a program like that. But in trying to sort of set it up at the beginning, I thought, oh, I'm not smart enough for this. My IT abilities were kind of left behind with like Windows 97 or something. So I went old school. I had it in a Google Doc because I was terrified of losing it if I had it on my just computer. So in the cloud, all like my main running document there, a kind of separate document with a vague outline of how I wanted it structured, all the transcripts, and then all of that printed out as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I did it. And that's how we worked through the edit as well. I had 2 amazing editors for this once I'd handed it in. I think it was about a 9-month process, and we just went back and forward with like track changes and notes.
Wow.
Yeah, not overly sophisticated.
No, it's interesting. I think most people have said similar things when they're doing books. A couple of people do use Scrivener, but lots of people just stick with Word or whatever for the simplicity and going.
I think Scrivener is a massive learning curve, and when you just want to get something down, I abandoned it as well, even though
Yeah, that's the other thing I did was notes on the on your phone, just because things would come to me on the bus or in the middle of the night, and I learned long ago, if you don't write that down in the moment, as much as you tell yourself I must remember this,
you don't.
You won't. So I had pages and pages and pages of notes, whether it was like a line of the intro to chapter 4, or whether it was ask so and so in a follow-up interview about this or whatever.
Yeah.
How fantastic. Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Shannon, for coming on and telling us about the book and all the behind the scenes stuff and about your story. We're going to put a link in the show notes to where people can buy it. And it's a fantastic book, so we encourage all of you to go out and get it. And
thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat, and I'm so conscious that this is not an easy topic to tackle, my second book, and I'm just so grateful for the openness and the invitation. And it's just been lovely to chat to you both in general.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you.
And thank you again to our sponsors, Rounded, easy accounting and invoicing software made just for Australian freelancers and sole traders. You can find them at rounded.com.au.
And we'll put everything in the show notes and see everybody next week.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Bye.